The following episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor is adapted from Pudding Faire by Will Doyle, Sean Merwin, and Cindy Moore. The crow of a rooster awakens the sleepers from their slumber, followed by the sound of a brass band cranking up.
Roll up for the Pudding Faire!
Cries a voice from the street below. Peering out of the inn's window, they see a crowd of happy halflings and gnomes bustling toward a fairground on the village green. It is 7 o'clock in the morning, on the day of the annual Honeypuddle Pudding Faire. The halfling rolls over, groaning about it being too early for the noise. The dwarf asks aloud how much he'd had to drink the night before, and the she-elf ponders aloud that she'd had the strangest dream, while Túrendil rushes outside to check Nanny Cowslip's condition, who is perfectly fine. The realization that they may be reliving the same day dawns on the four simultaneously. Jynx hits the cider booth. Hard. Rilyanasse rushes to help the puppeteer Emery Plumwicket set up his puppet show, saving his hand from an untimely crushing. Túrendil and Massul go to save Ringo Brackenbaum from his misfortune in the wrestling ring. Eager to avert the further misfortunes of the day, Massul rushes off to prevent Oinkers the pig from being taken by the giant eagle, while Rilyanasse investigates the livestock judging to find Farmer Butterweed's prize hog Cameron alive and well. Arriving at the pig wrestling ring, Massul can't help but notice that some of the wrestling pigs look a little more sinister than they did the day before. Rilyanasse inquires with Farmer Butterweed about his plans for after the fair, and when he says,
"Well, I'm gonna take my prize pig home, and we're gonna enjoy our nice prize stew together."
She says it sounds lovely, but suggests,
"Oh, that sounds lovely. Why don't you stay a little longer to enjoy the fair first, though? It seems like, I don't know, this might be the kind of day to invite bandits."
At Honeypuddle, during the Pudding Faire, absurd. But Cameron and I will be here until at least noon. That's when the judging is.
Rill knows, however, that the pig was not here at noon the day before. Jynx commiserates with Wellington Sparrow about his despair over Maisie Tucker's rejection, while continuing to drink himself under the table, just long enough to mug him for his drink. Meanwhile, at the hog wrestling arena, Massul spots the shadow of the giant eagle approaching over the treetops, and draws his lucerne hammer, leaping into the ring amid another match. The crowd boos his interference, but soon calms as the eagle pulls up, avoiding the threatening dwarf. Túrendil tries to draw out the dirty gnome responsible while tipping the jester and sitting through her routine again, but the heckler does not present himself. Massul notices a difference from the day before. A halfling in adventuring garb, who previously did not participate, enters the pig wrestling contest and easily wins. Jynx, having stolen Wellington's drink, drunkenly goes to speak to Maisie Tucker, asking her what's up with the man crying into his cups over her. She responds that she likes Wellington well enough, but her mother says the only man good enough for her could be the Pudding King, and Wellington's clumsiness means he couldn't win the Pudding Crown, explaining that the crown is won by having the best time at the game of Yundala's luck. Jynx begins arguing that Maisie is quite old enough to not need her mother's permission on anything. Maisie is doubtful, but Jynx proves quite convincing. Maisie rushes off to ask Wellington to the dance. Massul wanders down by the eel-eating competition and notices that some of the eels have started to grow prominent teeth. Jynx returns to the cider stand, and as they drain their 7th or so cup of cider of the morning, they find a dead, white mole laying in the bottom of the mug. Túrendil, surmising that a mage might know something about what's happening, goes to the Stump the Psychic game. As he makes his way, he sees a fire juggler lose his balance and drop a torch down the pants of a passing clown. Unable to do much, after the stir, Túrendil proceeds with the Psychic's game. Petunia Peppergrass again starts with the question of his age. Writing down the truth, 135, he is astounded when she guesses 26. "Miss Peppergrass, you know I'm an elf, yes?" She blinks and says meekly that she'd completely missed it, leaving Túrendil to think she is a fraud, disappointed that his planned strategy of thinking about how this is a repeat day and getting her to read his mind so he'd be believed is not to work out, but asks anyway. Clearly not getting the point, she shoots the breeze about what her day was like setting up for the fair. Losing patience, Túrendil offers to tell her about his day before, and does. He doesn't get very far before she says she needs a minute and closes up her shop. Massul goes to visit Nanny Cowslip and buys a large amount of candy as he strikes up a conversation about the progress of the fair. She says it's been a lovely day with nothing untoward, and she's glad Massul has been helping the villagers, but the alacrity with which he does so is uncanny. Noting that she tells the same story about how she's as old as the fair itself, Massul asks how old the fair is. She relates a fair story some lifetime of a halfling ago, which takes the dwarf aback, but he presses on, asking about the gnome prospector. She denies knowing of him, but agrees to send a runner to Massul if he should come in the gate. As their conversation concludes, Massul hears the old gaffer at his yard sale yelling at some kids, followed by a crash of glass, and hustles over to investigate. He finds that the gaffer was throwing turnips at some children who were stealing fruit from his orchard, and one went wild and smashed a window of the neighbor's greenhouse. Massul compensates the old gaffer for the stolen apples and the repair of the window, and picks something out from the yard sale at the grateful halfling's insistence. Massul is disturbed to note several items that were not there the day before. A pipe that puffs smoke clouds in the shape of skulls, a bloody wig from the victim of a beheading, and a doll carved from a dense, dark wood that's missing a hand and a foot. Rilyanasse goes by the archery competition, only to find the halfling adventurer woman, who did not participate the day before, making a run on the range, with the poor girl who was so bent on winning the day before on the verge of tears. Stepping up, the elf puts in a repeat performance and wins. Barely. At noon, Rill catches the sound of an argument breaking out on the other side of the stand-up comics tent. Going toward the sound, she finds a small gnome with exaggerated features destroying an easel and kicking about pencils and charcoal, while the caricature artist cowers in her booth. Upon the question of what's going on, he rants that she drew a terrible portrait of him, and he won't stand to be insulted by a talentless slob. By this time, Jynx has drunk himself into a stupor. Túrendil returns to the comedy show to find hecklers again, but none so ruthless as the gnome from the day before, of whom there is no sign. Massul seeks out Mayor Barleydew and warns him about the gnome, who he doesn't seem to know much about despite their altercation the day before, leaving from here to the stone skipping contest, where he keeps the judge's attention on the contest-winning throw instead of the butterfly burst. Rilyanasse takes Túrendil to the caricaturist to give her business, the elves finding her art particularly good, actually, contrary to the upset gnome's earlier ravings. Massul goes to check in with Nanny Cowslip one more time toward the end of the day, and she gives him 6 of her magic jelly beans for his good deeds throughout the day. Túrendil makes a point of being within sight of the mayor by early evening, and his suspicions are rewarded when the dirty gnome seems to appear out of nowhere to confront the mayor. The elf waits to see what the scoundrel does, and unlike the day before, he opens with a direct threat. Waiting not a moment longer, he steps up behind the prospector, asking in a low tone, "Excuse me, you're going to do what now?" "Stay out of it, knife ears," rejoins the gnome before repeating his threat. The mayor agrees with Túrendil, telling Moldwarp that he can have some pudding when he's decided to be a good citizen. The gnome sighs and reaches for his bag of dust, turning the mayor into a frog. Calling the blessing of Corellon, the warpriest swings his sword at the gnome but can't seem to land a blow even after pursuing him through the street. Finally, Nephilium finds purchase, but no wound appears, prompting Moldwarp to turn on the elf. "You're a persistent one. What's your name, boy?" Túrendil names himself a servant of the Seldarine, refusing to give his name to this obviously supernatural being, whereupon Moldwarp storms off, too fast for the armored elf to keep up. Nanny Cowslip walks up to the Marquis just then, asking what has happened. After the crowd explains, she calmly says she has to go. Massul closely follows the elderly halfling. The 2 elves hurry after, and soon they find themselves in Threepenny Wood, where they had found the good wife's petrified body the night before. Nanny Cowslip steps in front and asks the adventurers to let her handle this. "Patcher Moldwarp, how did you turn Mayor Barleydew into a frog?" The gnome, if that's what he was, turns around, slowly, and his face twists into a rictus grin. "You've returned," he says. "Why don't you go ahead and reveal yourself so we can do this all over again? After all, it's not often that 2 such as us meet." After considering for a moment, Cowslip stands tall. Her clothes seem to shift. She still appears as an older woman, but one who is very beautiful when younger. She seems bigger than the adventurers, but somehow not taller at the same time. She wears an apron and a little bonnet on her head. Túrendil recognizes her now not as Nanny Cowslip, but as Cirolale, the halfling goddess of home and hearth. She speaks in a voice now that fills not only the air, but the minds of those present. "You have intruded upon my Pudding Faire and are not welcome here." Patcher Moldwarp shifts as well, turning into the form of a white mole with steel claws, also feeling bigger than he appears. He's now recognizable as Erdlin, the gnomish god of death, greed, and murder. Fear not, children. Though you are not hin, you are friend to us, and I will protect you, Cirolale says, and begins casting a banishment spell, but Erdlin is faster. In a flash, the halfling goddess turns to stone, and the vile mole is gone. His voice echoes in the wind. Ye and all who live in Threepenny Wood are cursed to forget this day and relive it each morn, till I dine on pudding! Once again, the adventurers haul Nanny Cowslet's petrified body back to her cats, and bed down in the Squirrel and Nightjar Inn, knowing what awaits them the next morning. Thus concludes this episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor, but the adventure is far from over. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the next adventure.